Ooh, it is now streaming live on YouTube.
Hey, what do you know? It worked.
Well, congratulations. Very good. Who needs Jeff? Jeez. Overrated. Jeez. Okay. We have a long agenda tonight, so let's get going. I'd like to call to order the City of Sumner City Council study session. The date is April 12th and the time is 6 p.m. As yet another reminder, City Hall remains closed during Governor Inslee's Healthy Washington Recovery Roadmap order, consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the public has been invited to attend this meeting virtually by using the Zoom meeting link that has been posted on our website and is in the council agenda. That being the case, I would note that all council members are present. And let's get moving into regular business because we got 4 large items right there. First one is the South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership. And you heard me talk about this before to some degree, in that our whole region is, I'm not gonna go into this whole bunch for myself because John's got it included in all his presentation there, John Howell does, but we're in a housing crisis, supply demand such that the cost of housing is ever increasing and creating a situation where people are being forced out of their homes, not being able to pay their mortgage, or forced out of their apartments because they can't make rent. And you know, that's a problem that's going to continue in the foreseeable future. So back 2018, 3 people, that was Executive Danmeyer, Mayor Woodard, and Council Member Ladenburg, got a group of mayors from Pierce County together and said, let's work together to create an approach to try to address the affordability issue. And that was sort of the beginnings of the effort. And they worked through numerous meetings over the last, almost 2.5 years, and brought in the services of the Cedar River Group, which has been a blessing to the group because they helped put structure to all this, and come up with a proposed interlocal agreement. So we have tonight with us John Howell, screwed up already, John Howell and Marty Kustra, and they have a PowerPoint presentation, and they're going to carry us through sort of what's behind the South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership and some basic components of it, and then open it up to questions at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, John?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for carving out some time on your busy agenda this evening. And Marty and I are going to tag team on some slides here, maybe take about 12 minutes or so with those, and then happy to answer any questions that you may have.
John, before you get going, could you hit the presentation part of it? That's all right.
Yep, sorry.
There we go. It's better for my old eyes.
Yes,
thank you.
I apologize. I forgot to do that. So the mayor gave a nice introduction in talking about the work that's been underway, yes, for about 2.5 years. I'm going to pause on this slide for just a moment because it signifies something that has come out of those discussions for 2.5 years. More than a year ago, the group of mayors, council members who have been meeting pretty regularly to talk about how they might be able to work together collaboratively on housing came up with the name SHAPE, South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. But in the course of the last year, the deeper they got into this, the more they talked about the different needs, the unique needs across the various cities, county, tribes. They came to believe that if this structure, SHAPE, is going to be successful, that the A really stands for affordable, attainable, and accessible housing for Pierce County residents. And by that, they mean a range of housing types for a range of household incomes across the county in a wide range of communities, cities, towns, tribes, etc. So it's now still SHAPE, but the A is cubed. So tonight, we're going to talk with you just a little bit about sort of how did we get to this point, then really the crux of the matter, which is what would be the value of this new coalition? What's the current status? The mayor mentioned that a draft intergovernmental agreement has been drafted. So what are the next steps? Ultimately, what will your city and any city need to decide about joining this collaboration, and then questions. And for a little bit of history and the value proposition, I'm going to turn over to Marty.
Thank you, John. And we're just going to do a little context here setting. You all know the headlines. Mayor Pugh referred to the challenges we're facing in 2017. Rents were growing faster in Pierce County than King. And at the end of 2018, we saw that Tacoma's rent was starting to match that of Washington, D.C. And at the end of last year, a year none of us will ever forget, we started hearing more about Zoom towns, where we had people able to live and work where they were at home, and what that might do to outlying communities. And then, of course, we concluded the year with the news that Spanaway was the toughest place in the entire country to buy a home. You look at this graphic over on the upper left, you see that rents decreased significantly in parts of King County, but you look on the lower right and we see that significant increases in rent yet in Pierce County through 2022. And when you look at home prices themselves and compare them to Seattle or north of Seattle, you saw 8 to 13% increases. In parts of Pierce County, you're looking at much more significant increase just in home prices themselves. So Mayor Pugh and John all alluded to this. October 2018 was the first Mayor's Roundtable. Then another one was held in 2019. And since then, there have been a lot of meetings and a lot of work done. And April 2020, Cedar River Group was brought on to help the group go through a process of considering formalization, which we'll talk more about. Of course, Mayor Pugh has been part of the roundtable and full group meetings for the past 2 years. We're thankful for that. And the city did provide funding support to allow the consultants to be hired to get us to where we are today. So what would SHAPE really do? Well, the basic idea is we want to create more accessible, affordable, and attainable housing because it's a regional challenge, and we know we need to work across boundaries. We believe that we can have more impact by working more closely together, and we can also pool resources that could increase the capabilities of the region far above any one jurisdiction. And of course, we want to have a strong voice in Olympia and elsewhere if we join together. What is this model based on? Well, it just so happens when you look across the country, 3 other entities exist right here in Pierce County's backyard. Arch has been around for 27 years. It's created nearly 8,000 units of affordable housing. Snohomish County has AHA, which has been around for 8 years, and then SKIP, South King County Housing and Homelessness Partners, just started its work last year. So what SHAPE might do? Well, provide solutions to stave off displacement of low-income households and sustain existing homeowners at risk. As we see these rising house prices, folks who are in lower income brackets are being displaced, can't necessarily afford to take care of their home, pay property taxes, whatever it might be. Develop and implement policies and programs that accelerate the access to more housing that's affordable. Possibly create a capital fund to support the development and preservation of housing. And then, of course, represent governments in Pierce County at decision tables. Some specific examples could be creating more housing where it's desired and capable of happening, or preserving, do a preservation program. Research and implement strategies that cities and jurisdictions may have put together in their housing strategy plans and action plans. I believe that's something that you all have been working on. evaluate the regulatory framework to create a more streamlined permitting process, and then of course try to secure more grants for funding of affordable housing. So when we think about how this will all take place, there will be an executive board. John will tell you more about that, and they will be responsible for determining the annual work plan. That work plan will probably include items that work specifically for a member of government, as well as some that might work across the membership. And the staff that will be hired will work on unique plans for each of the participating governments. And finally, what SHAPE will not do: usurp any government's land use authority, duplicate the work already being done by any government or quasi-governmental entity like PCRC or PSRC, or become another layer of bureaucracy, adding on yet more regulations to the development and preservation of affordable and attainable housing. John, take it away.
So just a couple more slides and then answer any questions you may have. Just want to make it really clear that this is a voluntary initiative. This is for governments that want to participate in this cross jurisdictional, cross boundary effort. It's a coalition of the willing. We want to give you a quick snapshot of where things stand. So we have been out talking to, and by we, I should say, at many of the discussions and presentations to councils, Executive Danmeyer and or Mayor Woodards have been participating. So Marty and I and those two elected officials have been out talking to a number of jurisdictions. Those jurisdictions on this slide with the logos indicate where there has been the strongest interest in reviewing the intergovernmental agreement. Nobody has committed yet because just 10 days ago, we started circulation of a draft intergovernmental agreement. These are the jurisdictions that have been involved in the process up to this point, have said, because of the involvement for the last 2 years, we'd like to look at that intergovernmental agreement. The ones without the logo doesn't mean that they have passed on this, mostly. It means they have not been as involved in the discussions. And some of the names here without the logo, we are in the midst of going to their councils for discussions. So what happens next? As I mentioned a moment ago, we have circulated a draft intergovernmental agreement to every government in Pierce County, asked for their review, comments, or questions due back by April 23rd. We will take whatever comments we receive, review them with a steering committee of mayors and council members that's been meeting monthly for the last year and has created this draft intergovernmental. And we'll review those comments, create a final draft intergovernmental that will then be sent to the governments for decisions about adoption and joining SHAPE by hopefully by the end of June, so that by the second half of this year, we can work on creating the structure. So what would be decided? I've already mentioned the intergovernmental. Every government that wants to participate will need to review and approve the intergovernmental. That document deals with a whole host of issues that describe the role and responsibility of the new structure of the staff that will be created. I'll come back to that in a moment. The governance, as Marty mentioned, would be an executive board. Every member of SHAPE would have a seat on that executive board, and the steering committee has determined that they want to propose that every member gets one vote. So there's no weighted voting. It's one member, one vote on that executive board. The term of the agreement, creating an operating fund, potentially creating a capital fund, creating a community advisory board. And then there would have to be a administrative support structure put in place. And the steering committee has asked the county if they would be willing to provide administrative support, and they have agreed to do so. So the second piece that any government will have to decide is whether they want to make the commensurate financial contribution. The amounts of those contributions are based on population. Sumner's contribution to SHAPE on an annual basis would be somewhere in the range of 4,000 to 5,000. And the reason it's a range is because it will depend on the number of governments who ultimately decide to participate. And what that would support is 1.5 FTE to provide the sort of services that Marty was describing earlier to each of the member governments. Last slide. What are we trying to accomplish here? We just put in a slide at the very end to say what this is all about is creating more housing of different types for different income levels, for different family sizes in communities across the county. And these are just some examples of projects that are either recently built or are in the pipeline that we just pulled from. And with that, Mayor, happy to answer any questions or hear comments.
Thank you very much, both John and Marty. You know, it's interesting because when you look at, let me close this thing out here. When you look at some of the help that an organization like this could provide Sumner, the second thing you have on your agenda tonight is the Housing Action Plan. And, you know, this is a case where staff took the lead, in this case with Bonnie Lake, and went to the Department of Commerce, got a grant. And you're going to hear a lot of recommendations come out of that would be the same type of thing that the SHAPE staff would do. So why do I think it's still important to be involved is because we're going to have a lot of action items coming out of that a larger group consisting of SHAPE could help us on, or conversely, we could be part of a larger group that can help affordable housing other places. We have a housing crisis that is, you know, supply and demand. So I don't care whether we have increased supply in other jurisdictions. It will help us also because it helps in that overall supply and demand issue. Anyway, off of my soapbox, and I will turn it over to City Council members for questions or comments. Don't all speak at once. Councilmember Hochstetter or Cindy.
When he mentioned the 1.5 employee, I don't quite understand how that works because our $5,000 wouldn't be enough to pay for an employee. So where's that employee? Who's it employed by, and where's this help coming from, please?
Yeah. Yes, great question. First of all, let me just, it's a really good and obvious question. If we're paying 5,000, how are you going to get 1.5 FTE? Because the contributions are based on population, the county its contribution level order of magnitude is $130,000 annually. Tacoma contribution level annually, order of magnitude $60,000 annually. So there are some of the jurisdictions who will be paying considerably more because their populations are considerably larger. As to where that staff would be housed, the steering committee first wanted to make it clear that the executive board of SHAPE, again, every participant has a seat on that board, will guide and direct the staff. However, there needs to be an administrative structure. And we didn't want to recreate the wheel here. So the steering committee asked the county if the SHAPE staff could be county employees, but who would be guided and directed by the SHAPE board. And Executive Danmeyer has been wholeheartedly supportive of this concept. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Whoops, unmute myself. Good question, Cindy. Thank you. Other council members, questions or comments? Go ahead, Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I have no, I mean, we'd be absolutely remiss to not do this. So I don't have questions about whether we should or shouldn't, but I do have a couple of curiosity questions about how it works moving forward. First, is that that 1.5, is that new staff, or are they talking about with county housing that? Is that existing staff out of planning or something? Do you happen to know?
Yes, that would be new staff. In fact, last week, we were working with a group of staff members from many jurisdictions who have been supporting this work along the way, starting to work on a job description.
Okay, great.
With the assumption that enough communities are going to sign on to this, we thought, let's get ahead of the game a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And then, and I think you addressed this in the presentation. I just want to make sure that I understood it correctly. When it comes to the work plan, you know, over like the next year, next 3-5 years, whatever, do I understand that it's the jurisdiction, the combined jurisdictions, regardless of proportion to what they put into that larger fund, they each get 1 vote, and that includes voting on work plan and what gets put in?
You got it exactly right.
You should have asked for more.
That was a good leading question, Charlotte. Yes, and that's precisely the right answer. Yep.
Let me just add something here, but I don't know if this is going to be counterintuitive at all. One of the strongest proponents of that notion of every member gets 1 vote regardless of how much they contribute was Mayor Woodard's. She has felt since day one that what happens in Sumner, Puyallup, Lakewood benefits Tacoma in terms of the notion that Mayor Pugh described earlier about the more we can do to bring on more supply in the county, we all benefit.
The burden has largely fallen on them when we refuse to do nothing. So like, or anything. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate the work.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments, council members? Go ahead, Josh.
So there were a lot of logos that were not up there yet, and I'm just wondering what reasons other than cost would somebody not participate in this? Because it seems to me like almost a no-brainer.
Yeah. A couple. And Mayor Pugh, please chime in. I know you've talked to some of your colleagues, but I would say there are a handful of jurisdictions who don't see enough value to within their boundaries. You know, it's okay, maybe we see the value countywide, but really what's going to come back to us? And so I think there are a couple who feel a little bit that way. There are a couple, and some of these cities may join, but when we've talked to the council, some council members have said, we're primarily a single family predominant city or town. And gosh, this seems like it would be more useful for higher density housing. Marty and I have actually spent a fair amount of time thinking through how SHAPE could help communities who want to create more single family product. And yes, the market is the main driver, but there are some things governments can do. And so we have a sort of a talking points of 5 or 6 things that SHAPE could do to enhance the single family market. But there's some reticence in some quarters about that. Mayor or Marty, anything else you would add to that?
No, you pretty much hit it on the head. I have the ones I've talked to. Each one is, well, I don't know if it really applies to us because, like you said, more single family or you know, the fact that some are like Bunny Lake made efforts on their housing action plan the same way we have. And yeah, I guess my point on it was, well, that's great to have that, but bring in a larger resource, you know, from the region to help you fulfill the items that are on that action plan. Can't hurt, and it doesn't cost you that much. I'm sorry, you know, come on. And you have the have a funding source that's coming in now that can, help pay for it. So better together. Sorry, we have that whole mantra with the school district, and because it spans the whole area of Sumner and Bonnie Lake and the plateau down to Holly. And truly, better together, better if you're working together to have a better outcome. So we'll keep on working at them.
That's really powerful, Mayor. And when we think about this, what you're describing, we kind of talk about it from a perspective of gives and gets. And the fact that you have a housing strategy plan and that you're going to move forward and enact it means that you will be learning and doing along the way. And if you can be at a table sharing that learning and doing with other jurisdictions and governments, the power of that is really one of the reasons why we're trying to see more of this happen.
Yeah, we already volunteered, Ryan. Okay, other council member comments. Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all good. I mean, at the beginning, we are pretty much it seems to be, single family dwellings for the most part, but, there are a number of multi-family dwellings as well. And I just think as we see the struggle that so many families are having, that, it's got to be a win for everybody. And I'm glad that you've been a part of it, Mayor, because, it just helps to bring Sumner to the table. And we are, we want to be progressive, and we also want to support our families. So I think it's a good plan. So I like hearing it.
Yeah, and you're all going to hear from, from Ryan and et cetera on the housing action plan. And yeah, we're single family primarily, but we're transitioning into a lot of high density. And then we start looking at some of the needs that we have within the community and the shortfall in terms of housing. It's pretty serious. Let's see, any other hands up before I go back to you, Charlotte? Go ahead, Charlotte.
No, I just want to preach for a second, which I don't usually like to do, but when remind everyone that single housing doesn't mean, doesn't exclude a need from being affordable. And Sumner specifically, we have a lot of seniors who are on Social Security only. And people I hope that we never get back to the mentality of thinking Section 8 housing only in terms of affordability. We need to move forward from that. So I don't care, single family, we also have cultures with it could be single family home, could have many generations living in it. There's just this is not a one type of family or need. And that's why it helps to bring all of the brains together.
Councilman, if I could just make a quick comment on that, Mayor. Councilmember Newman, as we've gone around to cities, one of the common threads, east to west, north to south, around the county, has been seniors who are feeling squeezed out of their homes. And I would be surprised if, when the executive board meets and talks about what its work plan should be for the next 2 years, if senior housing isn't something that is one of those things that binds communities together. Yeah, our communities are really different, but we've got that same problem. That may well be the sort of thing that this staff capacity could do some work across multiple jurisdictions to develop some ideas and strategies.
I think, yeah, very well stated, John. I think the senior housing is going to be a commonality. The whole Alice issue is going to be common to a lot of jurisdictions. Like Charlotte said, multi-generational families are going to be common. So we have probably more in common than not when you start looking at some of the issues we're facing. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to jump on the bandwagon about senior housing, and Charlotte was exactly right. I hear that more than anything about senior housing. And I also want to say I appreciate all the work and planning and all the thoughts that have gone into this. It's huge. So thank you to everybody that's been involved so far.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other council members? Wow. Okay. Well, just so you know, staff is, fine tooth combing the agreement and going through, and we'll getting, comments, back to you. And then, as I understand it, you will take that along with the steering group and finalize the final draft, to bring. In the meantime, I think myself and other mayors need to continue reaching out to those other jurisdictions and try to get them on board the train here. Because needs some convincing, obviously, and we should be doing that.
Just today, we set May 6th to go before the Pierce County Cities and Towns Association.
Good.
So we'll, some of the cities where we haven't gone and done actual council presentations, hopefully we'll be able to cover them there.
Good. And looking at the ones that didn't have logos on it, yeah, there are a number of them that attend, the Pierce County Cities and Towns. So that'll be a good forum for that. Okay. Don't see any other hands raised. Jason, do you have any questions or comments or thoughts or?
No, the only thing I'll add, and you kind of hinted to it, Mayor, but the funding source for our contribution comes from the state shared affordable housing sales tax revenue that council passed last year. So as a reminder, we're going to get about $45,000 a year in funding under that program.
So it just seems like this is an appropriate expenditure for that. Yeah. Okay. I don't see anything else. John, Marty, thank you very much. Appreciate you attending tonight. Another evening taken out of your week, but we truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Do you mind, we don't need to be on the screen or anything, but do you mind if we just listen into the conversation about the housing action plan?
I think that would be great. If you would.
Thank you.
Listen in.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate that. Okay. That being the case, we'll move on to the Housing Action Plan and the Planning Commission recommendation. And do I go directly to Mr. Windisch or do I start with you? Go, Mr. Windisch. Oh, bearded one, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pugh. Can you hear me? Good.
We can hear you fine.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mayor Pugh. Yes, I'm Ryan Windisch, your Community Development Director, and it's great to be in front of you and Council tonight and presenting the Planning Commission recommendation for the Sumner's Housing Action Plan. And what's fantastic is that I get to hand this off to Clay White. Clay White is our consultant who has been working with his consulting team, Bonnie Lake, and our robust advisory committee on this project for, well, since about last June. So we have got a draft. Well, it's hopefully going to be a final draft here before long in front of you tonight. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review it and are ready to talk about it and have some good questions. But I do want to turn this over to Clay White. He's with LDC, and Clay's going to kick it off, and then I'll pick it up a little bit later. So Clay, it's the show's yours.
Great. Hopefully my screen is shared. And again, Mayor, council members, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I've really enjoyed working with the city over the last year. Prior to joining the private sector, I spent 16 years working for local government. In fact, this is a great lead in tonight, as I was the planning director for Snohomish County when AHA was started, which is a similar organization up on the north end in Snohomish County. And certainly a huge benefit having that organization in the county to share information and have a central focal point for affordable housing issues. So couldn't have had a better lead in with the first presentation. So tonight we're just going to go through the housing action plan a bit, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we just have a few objectives. We'd like to brief council on the project schedule, and then just talk a little bit about the project background, the goals, the work we've completed this far. We'll give you a brief overview of the draft housing action plan, then of course be here for any questions that you might have. And we're trying to hit the right level with this presentation tonight. Planners can go deep, and I want to make sure that we're hitting all of the right information, but also want to make sure that that we can really hit everything that we need to. So just wanted to update you a little bit on the project schedule. So we have been at this actually since April of last year. So we're pretty much at our 1 year mark. And we started with our project charter and public participation plan. One of the goals of the statute where you've got your grant was to really engage an advisory committee and the public. So we completed that. I know Ryan provided a briefing for you all the way back in June of last year. So it's been a long time. Throughout the last few months, we've completed a housing needs assessment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then a preliminary a draft housing action plan, which went through public comment. And right now we're at the final housing action plan, and we've completed the planning commission, and now we're at the city council level. So we're on time, on schedule, which is always a good thing. But we've had a really robust process, which we'll talk about. These are kind of the last steps that we have left. Obviously, we're here for a briefing tonight. Any feedback that we get from council tonight, we can come back prepared for the June meeting, so we can make our May meeting, excuse me, so we can answer any questions that you have that maybe we can't answer tonight. And then, of course, this is linked to the Bonnie Lake process, since this was a joint project, and they just had a planning commission meeting last week, and so they're going through a similar process you are right now of finalizing this project. So let's just go through the housing action plan a little bit. So we'll review the project background and talk a little bit about our approach to public participation. We'll give you an overview of the entire plan, and then just kind of introduce you to the actions. And it plays so well with the first presentation tonight of, we have these housing issues. What are some things that the city of Sumner could consider doing about it? And so this just provides you lots of ideas about ways you can tackle housing issues. But just a little bit of background. So as the legislature has recognized that we have a housing crisis, and in 2019, they passed House Bill 1923, and it really just focused on increasing residential housing options, housing at all levels, including affordable housing. And a housing action plan was one of those options that was presented. The cities of Sumner and Bonnie Lake decided to go in and do a project together. And our project completion deadline is June 30th of this year. Just to make it very clear up front, because it could help frame up questions, is the plan does not result in any code or policy changes itself. It just sets up actions that you can take in the future. We'll talk a little bit about how you can prioritize some of those actions. And then, this is just one of the pieces of the puzzle that we tackle housing. Obviously, looking at things from a regional perspective also can play a big piece. Sumner has one piece in it, but you're only planning for a certain portion of population, whereas the county and all the cities are planning for a much larger piece of the population as we continue to grow over the next few decades. In fact, I think that in the 4-county region for Pierce, King, Snohomish, and Kitsap, we're looking at trying to accommodate 1.8 million people by the year 2050. So we're going to continue to grow and face a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. So a housing action plan has 2 primary pieces to it: a housing needs assessment, and then the housing action plan. The housing needs assessment is the data. So if you love housing data, we have a lot of it that kind of goes through the city of Sumner, and I find it very interesting, and you can kind of see where you're at. One of the key things that came out of this is that the city of Sumner provides more affordable housing than a lot of cities in the region. That your housing is actually at a better price point than a lot of those cities. It doesn't mean there's not challenges, however. But through the housing needs assessment, we quantified the existing and projected housing needs for all income levels. We analyzed population and employment trends, and then we evaluated the success in attaining planned housing types. So, what are you planning for, and how's it going? So it's kind of looking back at your housing issues. And then, of course, your housing action plan is, what strategies could we look at to minimize displacement of lower income residents as redevelopment takes place. So typically lower income housing is replaced with more expensive housing, and then what happens to those residents. In addition, looking at what strategies we could look at to increase the supply of housing of all types, and then including a schedule of programs and actions to implement your housing action plan. So, developing what are those actions you could take, and when will you, think about considering those actions. Now, here's one of the things that I really think makes this planning process an opportunity moment. In 2024, you will, under the growth management, you'll be adopting a new comprehensive plan for the city, updating it. As part of that, you're going to be planning for more people, more housing, more population. But what's kind of hard about planning is that when you go through a comprehensive plan update, you're talking about housing and land use. You're also talking about parks, capital facilities, all of these things that come with this big plan update that takes a lot of time and effort. We don't get a lot of opportunity to pull out housing out of this conversation. So you can think of this project as an early action. So some of these, the actions that we've come up with that you may consider, they could be easy pickings, things you could do over the next couple of years, or some of them might be good things to think about to pair with your comprehensive plan update. So think of them as kind of this early strategies and actions that you can take. So this pairs up really well with all of the regional work that's going on with PSRC and buildable lands and countywide planning policies. Good lead up action. So another piece of kind of the housing action plan purpose is the public participation. We are required to provide input from community members and groups, local builders, local realtors, nonprofit housing advocates, religious groups that came from the statute. And as part of this, we did hold advisory committee meetings. So we held 3 with our advisory committee group, and then of course, planning commission and city council hearings. One of the things I thought I would share with you a little bit tonight is just some of the feedback that we received from citizens and stakeholders and advisory community group members. One of the things that we heard from the CEO of the Bonnie Lake Food Bank was that food insecurity is a symptom of a bigger problem. We know that families that come to us have more barriers to stability, and having access to safe, affordable housing would relieve so much pressure on the families we serve and the larger community. So, this is what a lot of that connection that we heard as we engage with our advisory community group. In addition, on our public participation, you have a great Sumner's Connect page, which really provides a lot of engagement for citizens and stakeholders. So all of the documents are online, all of the advisory committee meeting videos. So if you wanted to go back and relive those moments, you certainly can. And of course, we had discussion forums where people could provide us questions and answers, and we could be interactive, especially during COVID. That was certainly important when we can't have in-person meetings. So we did a lot of public outreach opportunities for the public to review and comment on the document, and then of course, our planning commission and council hearings. And as David Dirth, one of our advisory committee members, had talked about, growth in all sectors of housing will be a sign that the housing action plan is a success. The existing stock stays viable, or we add more options for accessory dwelling units to high-end single-family homes. And just if wanted to kind of just say a big thank you to our advisory committee members. Just wanted to list them all here, including one of your planning commission members who graciously spent 3 more evenings and read a lot of material so that he could be a part of this housing action plan process. So I want to make sure that we thanked him. And of course, from the school district, we heard, staying at your school of origin is the best way to avoid learning loss. If kids were mostly more stably housed, we know they would be more successful academically, socially, emotionally. The benefits of stable, affordable housing can't be overstated for the lives of our students. And just to kind of highlight Sumner Connects, this is the type of feedback that we received online. I don't think we have enough variety of housing to meet the needs of different income brackets. And another comment, currently the city of Sumner is almost entirely inaccessible to first-time home buyers. So these are probably not things that you haven't heard before, but it was great to hear things like we need more condominiums in town, or as the population ages, we don't have enough senior housing, which is something that the council had talked about tonight. So I won't go through this whole thing, but this is in your introduction of the housing action plan. And if planning seems complicated to people that don't do this all the time, this is one way to just explain a housing action plan in one graphic. And one of the things I think that really helps is breaking down housing into more tangible questions. And, it's answering questions like, will young families be able to find housing that's affordable in our community in the future? And as our family and friends age, will there be housing to ensure that they can afford to stay in our community? Or, how do we ensure housing is available for teachers, caregivers, and single family incomes? I think when we talk about single family detached communities versus allowing housing that, of all income levels, it kind of breaks down those barriers when we ask those questions in that way. And so those were some of the key questions that we asked. And then we completed our housing needs assessment, which talked about how affordable is housing today, and how are both cities expected to grow in the future, and then what kind of housing will meet the current and projected needs. And then utilized engagement so that we made sure the community voice was heard. And then we filter all that through, and then you get your draft housing action plan, which we're presenting. And it just outlines a variety of proactive strategies each community could take to help address the current and future housing needs of the city. So just a little bit about the layout. This is just your front cover, but we've organized this document. It's very, it's long like a lot of planning documents, but you'll find that there's an executive summary and introduction. So if you're wanting to get a snapshot, you can read that in just a few pages, and you'll get a good understanding of kind of what the project is, who we're doing it for, and kind of a great outline of how this a plan can help address some housing issues. One of the things I think that's super helpful that'll help you navigate is the table of contents. Will link you anywhere in the document. So if you find something you want to read, just click on it, it'll take you to that page. Once you read that page, you can click table of contents at the top of the page. It'll take you back to the beginning of the document. So hopefully that makes it much easier to navigate. There's a housing needs assessment summary. We've put the larger housing needs assessment back in the appendix. It's more of a slideshow kind of format. So if you want a snapshot at kind of what's happening with housing in your community, certainly you can go to that. And then we have the housing action plan, which we'll talk about right now. So what we've kind of done is we've divided this into strategies and actions. And so we've come up with 6 different strategies, and then we've listed a number of different actions the city could choose to take in order to address each one of these strategies. And when Ryan goes through this in a little bit, you'll see there's a lot of overlap. So sometimes there's an action you can take that could hit more than one strategy. So the 6 topics that we came up with were ways that we could preserve rental housing, incentives for new rental housing, ideas for providing a wider variety of housing types, all types of housing, preventing and mitigating displacement. This is one of the items that is a requirement in the statute. So really kind of looking at when redevelopment takes place, what happens to folks that are living in the housing that's there, ways to reduce development costs, and improving the permit process. And I won't read this, but this is just an example of what one of the actions looks like so that you can see what it looks like. And what we've tried to do is most of them are 1 page, and it just describes the action, kind of what could you do. It's very high level. But in addition, what we've done is in most cases, we've listed other jurisdictions that have taken the same or similar actions. Sometimes it's nice to know that a particular action isn't weird or wonky, or you wouldn't be the first city to be doing it. So you'll see a lot of times some cities that you can use as kind of reference points. And then we've tried to highlight advantages and disadvantages of taking that action. So you kind of know what you're getting into if you decided to go through the legislative process. And then of course, for each action that's included in the action schedule and summary table that's in the plan, it kind of just outlines when you may think about taking this action. there is no commitment for you to take any of them, but the statute and the grant kind of requires you to do some filtering process of when might this be considered. Some might be early actions over the next couple of years. Some might be things that you consider as part of your comprehensive plan update. But again, the way that I think about this is it's just tools in the tool belt. And, as jurisdictions, it's nice to be able to have those. It provides some ideas of actions the city can take. There's no requirement to move forward on the actions that are identified. So if you vote in favor of the plan, that doesn't mean you have to like every action that's been identified. They're just things for you to consider. Any future action will require a full public participation process. So that's the legislative process in the future. So you'll go through your normal code update process. And so you'll have a process to re-engage with citizens and stakeholders once again. Some of the actions could be low-hanging fruit, and then others may be more complicated. But it's a good community conversation that we've had. And one of the things I think Ryan might bring up as he goes through the actions, but the Planning Commission made a recommendation that you might have a further refinement process after this plan's adopted to really go through and prioritize which of these actions is most important to you and which ones you might want to think about first, and then maybe ones that you'd like to think about later. So that will help so the conversation can keep going. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Ryan to talk a little bit about the individual actions that go with each one of the strategies.
All right, thank you, Clay. Yeah, so as Clay had said, there's 16 different strategies, and we have a number of different actions, and some of those actions definitely do overlap between the different strategies. And the first strategy is preserving rental housing. And as Clay also mentioned, Sumner is fortunate to have relatively affordable housing in Sumner. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have some older multifamily housing stock that, one strategy would be to preserve it or look for a replacement of that housing if it were to be redeveloped, and different ways of doing that through inclusionary zoning, which I'll talk about in another slide. And another thing that we could look at is, that's one of the actions proposed, is creating an incentive program for maintaining these existing properties so they stay viable, they stay safe, they stay crime-free. And so there's a recommendation in the plan for an incentive program. And incentives, what are some of the incentives that we could put forward for new rental housing? And as I mentioned, there's inclusionary zoning is one of the tools on the tool belt. And the recommendation is that it be a voluntary program. Usually it's centered around density bonuses or other types of tax incentives, such as a current use assessment, which is very similar to the multifamily tax exemption that we have in place presently in the town center plan area. And that's where the property tax assessment is held at the value of the property when it was first purchased and doesn't include the development that has occurred. Developers really like this option. It gives them a tax break for 8 to 12 years, 12 years if you do affordable housing units. So that's a way you can build in incentives. Bounce around here a little bit, but density bonuses would be a situation where if you were to provide a certain percentage of affordable units in your development, you'd get density above and beyond what's presently allowed in that zone. So it creates an incentive there as well. And preventing and mitigating displacement. This kind of goes hand in hand with the other two strategies. As we've heard from the previous presentation and what's going on at the county level with SHAPE, 1406 tax dollars could go to reduce development costs directly, or they could go towards which is what is recommended in our action, they could go towards a regional organization that would be working towards affordable housing solutions as well, which is what's proposed there. You could have We also have some recommendations for affordable housing. Let's see here. You know what? I've already talked about all of the rest of the bullets. So there's your overlap. Providing a wider variety of housing types, and not unlike the SHAPE presentation, you know, how can we make more housing options for more people that's more affordable, right? A lot of different creative ideas here. One would be to look again at our accessory dwelling units regulations. I say again because while it may seem in distant memory of other folks, it seems very fresh to me, but we went through a pretty extensive rewrite of those several years ago. But anyway, taking a look at how we can make those work better or easier or broader. Also, maybe modifying the allowed uses to increase a range of missing middle housing. Missing middle housing has to do with housing that's like a duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. We want to allow those more liberally throughout our community, particularly in our low density residential zones, or not. So that's a kind of a question put forward as an action. Expand where our senior housing can be built. Our consultants went in and really kind of took a real close look. Well, how easy is it to build senior housing in Sumner? And there are some definite things that we could make some changes to that would make it easier in terms of permitting and location. And then I don't know if you noticed it or not, but we had the president of the Washington Tiny Homes Association on our advisory committee. And so we have some potential recommendations for tiny homes, how those could be allowed in town. Those are small structures that are built on a chassis, and there's different options for how those could be permitted in the community. And then improve administration of unit lot subdivisions. Now, unit lot subdivision is really the ability to subdivide if you could picture a townhouse like in the lower left illustration there, and you could subdivide that townhouse off on its own lot, kind of like a condo with a lot. That could create an affordable housing option, especially for potentially first-time home buyers. And then overall, we're always looking at how do you reduce the development costs? The overall cost of building a house, they say the development costs can be 25% of the overall cost of the home. So if we can reduce those, we can make things potentially more affordable. Time is money. So anytime we can fast track our permit process, that's a good thing. Maybe what we'd want to do is prioritize something like, hey, senior housing, that's going to be a priority. So we want to fast track those, for example. Other things for increasing the number of available lots that are more quicker and less expensive. You could do, instead of a short plat, a subdivision up to 4 lots. You could allow a short plat process for subdivisions up to 9 lots. And those are fairly straightforward processes that don't require as much time and effort on a developer's part. So that would be another way to do it. There's also SEPA exemption levels that could be changed, increased, honestly, in order to allow for a little bit larger developments to go forward with being exempt from SEPA, which again is kind of time issues there. And then the hard cost of actually putting in infrastructure. There's some recommended actions for taking a look at road standards, increase site flexibility to help reduce those costs of actual putting in utilities and roads. I already mentioned a little bit about improving the permit process. So I think I talked on all these. Yeah, fast tracking, larger short plats. I got those covered. We have a couple more strategies. Oh, I think I got through them all. So key questions for moving forward. Do the strategies focus on issues that should be tackled? I heard, and I think I heard from council earlier in the earlier discussion, and I think it's been reflected in our housing action plan that senior housing is very important. Are there additional actions that Sumner should consider? Should one or more of the ideas be modified or removed from consideration? Anything that you saw that was particularly concerning that you want to have removed? Are there issues we should explore or information we should bring back to the city council before the May 3rd meeting or at the May 3rd meeting to talk about? So we held a public hearing at the Planning Commission. And so we were not planning on holding a public hearing at City Council. We felt like, given the fact that we had such a robust process and that the actions are recommendations and that there be further legislative action to follow, that we could move forward with council action in May. So that's what we're hoping to be able to do. So we're open for questions on the housing action plan. That's it.
Well, that's quite an understatement that that's it. I wrote down the number of strategy slides you went through, and it was 6, but it felt like it was a 12-course meal because you had at least 2 per each that were just major. I mean, that's a lot of information. So, okay, council members, questions or comments for Clay or Ryan? Or are you still digesting? Go ahead, Kathy.
So is this something that goes along with the other housing plan, or is it one or the other? Or I'm a little confused on 2 in a row. So they partner? Can you explain?
Yeah, I can take a shot at it. Clay's got more experience with Snohomish County, but the SHAPE proposal we heard earlier they definitely relate to each other. SHAPE looks at things Pierce County wide, kind of a regional take on it. What I heard is that we would be able to potentially use them as a resource. So if we were working on, say, some kind of a senior housing initiative or inclusionary zoning initiative, we could tap them for some help in at least a review of what we potentially are writing and trying to put forward. So they would be kind of looking at this at a county level. We'd be interacting with them. The $1,406 that we pointed out would be going to SHAPE, and that would be kind of the interaction we would have. Sumner is going to be the ones focused on our own code, our own programs kind of within our city limits and what we're going to do. But there'd be definitely communication with the Pierce County at the Pierce County level.
Yeah, let me throw in is that, I mean, we could use SHAPE as a resource. We're a member of that group. We can use it as a resource. But again, we're also part of a larger group to help on a regional basis do the same thing across all those jurisdictions. Because it's just not us, it's everyone out there, and they're all facing this. And it was sort of serendipitous, but a lot of foresight by Mr. Windish here is to actually work with Bonnie Lake and get the Commerce money and to move ahead with a housing action plan. So, we've got a leg up in that area, but there's a long ways to go, and any resource, any help that we can get from SHAPE or anybody is going to be beneficial. And likewise, the help that we can give to SHAPE and other jurisdictions, I think is beneficial. So I don't know if that helped, Kathy.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you. So I assume that this is something we can always expand on, like in terms of the city. It's not like, so we approve this and it's not like we're limited to, because one thing that I feel like wasn't necessarily like highlighted in this is well, it kind of goes to the accessibility side, where it doesn't have to be regular like affordable housing or senior housing. Like I'm thinking about incentives where we have either existing multifamily units, or we finally have new ones come. Well, I should say finally, now we have a mad rush of new ones, which is why I would like to figure this out pretty quickly, because I think we're going to have our onset like with Red Apple and others coming in quickly, and I'm worried that they're going to be lost opportunities, but whether there are incentives to, for instance, for a builder to reserve some of the lower floor units for seniors. Because this is where it's not always affordability, sometimes it's accessibility. And if they're not, because of our height restrictions, not tall enough to require elevators, then the bottom floor is the only thing. And most of you know that I have always enjoyed living above trackside. And I got so many calls from adult children or adult grandchildren calling on behalf of their parents or grandparents, wanting to know where there were lower level units like mine, because they can't do yard work anymore. They can't do, but they don't want to leave Sumner. So like a hybrid, like it's not just about waiting for the next senior facility to be built, but how you make some like incentives for making some units just more accessible and available.
I mean, I'll speak to that. I mean, just great comment. And we've tried to tackle that a number of ways. So it's, there is an action that talks about senior housing, but it's also, you know, how do you keep that flow of housing possible where you can stay in your community so that you can move out of your single family home. So, I mean, it's even tackled in looking at accessory dwelling unit regulation. So, you know, there's times where that can be a good transition for a family member, but there's nowhere for them to move. And so
I do appreciate you addressing ADUs. I do.
So you can always go deeper, and this is just like a playbook of ideas, but obviously everything's always on the table. And senior housing was certainly something that was brought up with the advisory committee members as being, you know, really important to be looking at. Sumner honestly provides a lot of options for senior housing to be built in the zoning code. Ryan, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but versus some codes in some cities that limit where senior housing can be built, it's actually more permissive in Sumner than many jurisdictions.
Yeah, for example, the Franklin House is in a low density residential zone, and with a conditional use permit, they're able to put, I think there's 54 units altogether, and that is assisted living. So we do allow for those types of facilities even in our more or less single family neighborhoods.
But I think we're not necessarily talking about assisted living. You're looking at a place for a senior to be able to have an affordable house or affordable unit, whatever, that they can live in, that's accessible.
Who just doesn't want to mow the lawn anymore, but they don't need day-to-day care. Yeah.
Amen. Anyway, so that's one of the things you have to be looking at. Okay, Charlotte, are you through? Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Mine, I kind of have more of a comment, and some of it comes from my profession, I guess. I mean, I think the housing action plan is necessary, but it's more challenging than ever right now with cost of lumber, the demand, supply versus demand. I mean, you know, a piece of OSB today costs over $40. A year ago cost $10. Lumber has gone up 300%. So we do have to continue to look at this, I think, as a long-term solution. Like it almost seems daunting in the short term with what we're going through on the supply and demand side, but I do like the options of keeping people in their current rental units, and also where I think where some of these affordable housing options have not worked in the meetings that I've been in for like master builders associations and in Pierce County, and even when I lived in Portland, is the builders would, if they felt like there were too many regulations or loopholes or reporting things that they had to do to fit affordable housing into their apartments or things that they were building, then they just chose not to do it. So I do like the idea of trying to make it easier for them.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. Any other council member comments or questions? Okay, so Ryan, are you encouraging council to read over this document? And because like I said, tonight's presentation, I'm full already. And, you know, you want the council members to read over that and get back to you with any comments or questions or clarifications that's needed. Because the way I look at it, you have strategies and proposed actions, and a lot of them, but council could adopt this document, but it will require future action by the council to enact a lot of those various things. I mean, you're just
Yes.
setting out the strategy, but to actually carry through and affect portions of it will require more action by the council. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That's correct. And I think the power of this whole process, part of it is there's a lot of, in the housing needs assessment, there's a lot of great information on kind of what the real need is. And then the strategies, and as you go through the plan, it's fairly concise. Here's a strategy, here's some actions you can take. And I think it's pretty digestible, even for a planning document. Clay's done a good job. And if there's anything just kind of lightning, I'm looking for things that you just can't live with, I think would be very interesting to know. If for example, if tiny homes are just something the city doesn't want to deal with, then we can talk about that. And then, as the Planning Commission had said, things they'd like to prioritize. So I do want to see a process following council's approval of kind of prioritizing actions so that we can make sure we're focusing on those things that we think are most urgent soonest.
Okay, good clarifications, Ryan. Okay, you all heard it, folks. Read the thing over. There's a lot of stuff in there, and get back to Ryan if you got questions or concerns or issues, and we'll go from there. And Clay, thank you very, very much. When I saw the link to the PowerPoint presentation, in the agenda packet, I was going, holy moly, we're going to be here, a long time. But you guys did a good job of condensing a very complex issue into something that was, digestible for now. So, nice work and nice work on the plan.
Great, thank you. I've worked for 5 councils and commissions, so I've learned how to brevity and hitting the right level. So appreciate the opportunity tonight. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Okay. Hey, again, thank you, Clay. Take care. Okay. I think that, go ahead, Jason.
Mayor, I just wanted to echo one comment here. If council does have concerns, it'd be very beneficial to get those to Ryan next week, because the packet items are due shortly thereafter for the May 3rd meeting. So time is important.
So you heard it there. It's not just reading it over. He's given a deadline. Okay. We need to have you digest it and get back to us by exactly when, Mr. Wilson?
That would be next week, next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. That would be the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay.
20th, because it's due in the packet Friday. So that gives Ryan a couple days to address.
Okay, so there you have it. There's April 20th.
And Jason, or Mayor, I would just offer to volunteer, and with Jason's permission, if there's a council member that has questions and it's easier just to hop on a quick call and ask some questions about the plan. Ryan, of course, I'll be there to help support in any way that I can. Sometimes that can be easier.
I hear it, Clay. I'm gonna let you and Ryan arm wrestle over that one, and together you can tag team it and get back to the council members.
Ryan might pick
Absolutely.
my personality.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 3, which is the Main Street Visioning presentation from Winter Quarter. And introducing Winter Quarter is, that be you, Jason? I see you unmuted yourself, or is that Ryan?
That's Ryan, Mayor, and I'm in the process of letting everybody in, so it'll be just a second, but Ryan can get started.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Windish.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the City Council, tonight is our presentation from the UW-Tacoma Urban Design Studio class. They worked winter quarter on the Main Street visioning effort, and they have come up with a ton of ideas because they're students and they're very creative, and this is what we've asked them to do. But they've also narrowed down their work effort for spring quarter to some things that the city staff and the advisory committee had them focus on. So I want to introduce 3 people, and then they can introduce the students as they see needed. The first person I want to introduce is Assistant Professor Bara Safarova. She's been leading the effort under the supervision and guidance and mentorship of Dean Ollie Medeiros. Thank you, Ollie, for being here. And I'm going to hand this off to Gareth Rowe. Gareth has been talking about being on a fast-moving train because he has taken the lead of this effort, but he is adept at this. He helped with the former UW Tacoma project that we did on the Artisan and Innovation District. And so he's good at this. He's also has engineers in his office who are working on some projects that are near and dear to downtown. And so Gareth, take it away, and we look forward to hearing from your students.
Ryan, thank you very much. Mayor, council members, other staff members, and other guests, thank you for this opportunity. As Ryan mentioned, I feel I'm the newcomer to this event, and super excited to be a part of this. Tonight, you're going to hear not only from myself, but from Bara and a handful of our students. You probably hear from Abdul, Dennis, Cipriano, Jose, Chan, Jillian, Sabrina. And as Ryan mentioned, they've been working on this project for 2 quarters and have come up with some amazing design concepts for the Main Street corridor in downtown Sumner. And so we're going to give you a quick overview of some of those things. And then we'll go into a little bit more discussion about the 3 main concepts that the city and the Main Street Advisory Group has asked us to focus on. So Ryan, if I can share my screen.
You should be able to.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
There we go. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of work that has been done in the last 2 quarters. So let's dive right into this presentation, and I will turn it over to Bara.
Hi everyone. I'm just going to put my things up here. Okay, can you all hear me? Yep. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present students' draft concept ideas for the enhancements of Main Street and the surrounding district tonight. My name is Bara Safarova, and I, like Gareth said, led the team of 11 undergraduate students in the fall and winter quarters, and we presented our fall quarter work at the December council meeting. And the goal for the winter quarter that followed was to explore design opportunities and develop concept ideas to stimulate discussions with the Main Street Advisory Group and the public to select preferred alternatives to develop further in the spring. So from January to March, each student developed an urban design framework, each of which included proposed circulation strategy, proposed land uses, public spaces. They thought about activated street frontages and which ones should and shouldn't be activated, and gateways into the district. And then following that, each student developed a conceptual site plan, a fully developed site plan drawing, site sections, and they built 3D models and rendered 3D views to show how the proposal would look from the perspective of a pedestrian if you were to walk down the street. And then all of his work is getting collated into a single report that will be delivered at the conclusion of the overall project. So we're going to put it together with the fall, the winter, and the spring quarters all together. And the draft proposals, they were a great tool for engagement with the stakeholders and the general public. In the winter quarter, we held 2 live stream discussions with the 25+ Main Street Advisory Group and members of the public. And these workshops helped us rule out some ideas and develop others further. And at the end of the quarter, we held a decisions workshop where the city, together with the stakeholder group, narrowed down the exploratory design phase and selected objectives to move forward with into the design development phase that's undergoing right now in this spring quarter. And with that, I will hand it over to the students and to Gareth, who is leading them this quarter, to share the design concepts considered to date and the design objectives, the 3 design objectives that they are planning on developing further in this quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Bara. Next up, I think we got Abdul talking about this particular slide.
Hello, my name is Abdul. Today I'll be talking about the statement of proposal. We were tasked with developing individual proposals that meet the needs of the residents and visitors of downtown Sumner. Our designs focused on the following elements: the urban design frameworks, design concepts, Main Street cross sections, the Heritage Park and open spaces, and the alleyways in downtown Sumner.
So I'll continue our presentation. I'm looking specifically at the urban design frameworks that we made. As you can see in some of these are examples of the various urban design frameworks that were made throughout the winter quarter. On the bottom left is a urban design framework that looks at a larger scale, showing how we thought about circulation and movement from vehicles and pedestrians, how space is allocated at that scale. And you can see that a lot of the activity that we talked about and how we saw some of the activity on Main Street focuses really heavily on the retail spaces that are currently on Main Street. And right now we've been thinking about how pedestrian activity along Main Street interacts with the spaces that are to the north and south, and specifically the alleys. In the urban design framework on the bottom left, you can see that there's suggestions of creating more activated spaces in those alleys. And that's something that we'll talk about later on in the presentation as well. In terms of public spaces, one of the things that was common, a theme that was common throughout our presentations and throughout our work, was creating public spaces that are connected through pedestrian pathways and that they're also visually consistent. So using these green elements and vegetation as guides for visitors throughout the site, and so that it leads them to areas of interest. These areas of interest are largely greater green spaces or larger green spaces or areas where green elements are more focused. So using that green infrastructure as a guide. And as I mentioned earlier, so the green infrastructure is supposed to act as a connection to the major destinations. And it also is be present at vehicle intersections to create a buffer between pedestrians and vehicles and to signify for pedestrians where they'll be interacting with vehicles. And as we talked about alleyways, the goal for our alleyways was to provide safe alternative paths for pedestrians and to create viewpoints for pedestrians to the other major points along the site. And in terms of buildings, one thing that we wanted to make sure that we kept in mind as we were going through our work was making sure to keep the historic nature and the historic aspects of the buildings that are currently on the site, making sure to preserve those things, while also taking advantage of the current zoning that's allowed. We know that the zoning allows for higher buildings, taller buildings, but making sure that any proposed buildings would not take away from those historic buildings. And some of that things can be seen in our proposals as we move forward. I think we can move on to some of the concepts. Cipriano will be introducing the design concepts that we actually came up with and the alternatives that we had.
Thanks, Dennis.
Hello. Oh.
Go ahead, Cipriano.
All right. Hello, my name is Cipriano Mario, and this is the design concepts considered to date number 1. So the hub proposal creates a sense of community and develops an organized street network for commercial, retail, and residential building. It would reflect on the alternative of Main Street, where you could see the activity nodes, place in the location. So the closer to the activity node, that is where the center would be. For the neighborhood districts, this area south of Main Street is already zoned for high density and multi-story residential buildings. So it makes sense to take on the opportunity to build multifamily housing in that area. And a specific design concept was a rail to trail function, and the rail to trail opens and activates the space around the trails for a new public path and social interactions. The paths will be safe and secure for the site and provides a connection from downtown to the north side of Main Street. And most of my peers decided to place a WooNerf on the site, and my own vision of a WooNerf on Main Street makes the area function as an activity node and a social space. The WooNerf would also encourage mixed use transportation. If you have any more questions, or free to ask if I need to explain, that would be nice after this, but I'm going to hand it off to the next design concepts.
Thanks, Cipriano. I think we've got Jose up next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jose, and I'm going to be talking about, I'm also going to be talking about design concepts considered to date. One of the design concepts that we was adding a bus route. Since there was a bus route that used to run through Sumner, but it doesn't anymore, we wanted to bring it back into the area to improve access on Main Street and to allow access for people without a vehicle to access the downtown area. Another design concept is curb extensions. They can be used at intersections to improve the safety of pedestrians crossing the crosswalk, because it reduces the distance that they will have to be on the road and increases the overall visibility of the pedestrians. Another design concept is a one-way street on Main Street, which would allow for wider sidewalks and reduce the vehicle traffic on Main Street, making it a safer area for foot traffic and activities in the area. We understand that a bus route going through downtown or making a Main Street a one-way isn't something that can work right now due to the circulation issues it may cause with the railroad, but we hope it could be applied in the future. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Jose. Next up, we have Chan. Well, actually, next up is me. So as Barr mentioned, there's been a couple presentations, and from those presentations, we received feedback from city staff and the Main Street Advisory Group and other people. And we are going to, as we move forward for the rest of the quarter, focus on three main concepts: the Main Street cross section, and as Jose mentioned, it will be a two-way, not a one-way or a WooNerf down Main Street. But we're going to focus on the public realm from building face to building face, from Traffic Avenue all the way up to Ryan Avenue, and look at what happens within that space. Pedestrian access, street furniture, street trees, signage and wayfinding, different parking approaches, opportunities for parklets, as Jose mentioned, curb extensions, basically everything that happens within that Main Street cross section. The next main area of focus will be the Heritage Park Kincaid right away, and creating public spaces for community gathering events and connecting that public space to other public spaces within the downtown core. And then, as Dennis touched on before, we're going to focus on revitalizing the alleys and repurposing some of those spaces and creating connections from the alleys, not only back to Main Street, but to the north and south of Main Street. So moving forward, we'll be refining these key concepts. We will be taking a look at, we'll be doing a deep dive at looking at these concepts as it relates to implementation strategies, and then also constructability review. Part of what we'll be looking at this quarter is kind of the technical side of it, the civil engineering side of it, and can these things actually be built, and can they be implemented affordably? We'll do another midterm presentation, and then as Barr mentioned, we'll have a final presentation and our deliverable at the end of the quarter. So to talk about the three main concepts, I'm going to move forward and let Chan talk about the Main Street cross section.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. My name is Chan. I'll be talking about the Main Street cross section. So on the, like, if you see like on the slide, there is the 3D rendered section. They're all the section my peers worked on. And we all have similar ideas, but most are kind of different, but they're mostly all similar. So we wanted to change street trees from red to green, although we don't know the specific tree that are allowed on Main Street yet. And as Garrett has said, we're gonna keep the two-way street and not make it one way, as most of us try to make it one way, but, or not most of us, but like 3 of us have tried to make it one way, but we just wanted to keep it a two-way street. And we wanted to also replace some street parking with parklets and enhance a crosswalk with signs and lights and trees and lighting along Main Street. And so basically for our sidewalks, we're gonna be transforming it to parklets or rain gardens, also making the sidewalk space bigger, which would also narrow the street. The Main Street traffic will be available to vehicles and have cyclist lanes. And we're also keeping most of Main Street to be similar as the present one, but also add design features that would be beneficial for pedestrians. And on some of the spaces in Main Street, there is like unused space, and we would like to activate those space and transforming it into a plaza or a public market, and or green space or food truck. And the pictures you see on the slide right there will show the rain garden, the plazas, and just like wider sidewalk and the parklet, And yeah, that's but we all have similar ideas, and yeah, you can see it from the slide shown. All right, that's what I got from it.
Thank you, Chan. Next up is Jillian to talk about Heritage Park and Kincaid Avenue right away and public open spaces.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Jillian, and I will be talking about our ideas we considered for Heritage Park and open spaces. So Heritage Park and other open spaces were one of the main focuses in our proposals, and we intend to turn these spaces into comfortable, inviting, and engaging multi-use environments that are available both day and night and could serve as gathering places throughout the year. And in our proposals, we've considered various programming elements that could be used to draw visitors to these spaces. And examples of these various elements include a Woonerf, which we've considered on either Cherry Avenue or Kincaid Avenue, the option of food trucks, a farmer's market and other seasonal events, particularly in Heritage Park, the possibility of beer gardens, and access to public seating coverage to protect people from the elements and various public utilities. And events and amenities such as these would attract people to these spaces and would establish a sense of community. And additionally, other activities that could be implemented which could appeal to various age groups, could be things such as games like cornball toss, ping pong, or large chess sets, which could be used to keep visitors engaged in these spaces.
Hey, Jillian, just a second. We have a question from Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. I apologize for my ignorance. What is a Woonerf?
A Woonerf would be a street that is, or the sidewalks are level with like the street so that people share the space with the vehicles. Like it's all on the same level. And there could be barriers that are implemented to separate the walking space and the driving space, whether it's a change in texture on the ground.
Okay, and then what does a Woonerf achieve? What are the benefits to a Woonerf?
With a Woonerf, in some regards, it can sometimes they could be closed off and they could be turned into event spaces if they were considered to be that. It just gives
Okay,
more
great. Thank you.
It
availability.
gives you more flexibility,
You're
doesn't it, Jillian?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it
thank you.
does.
Thanks.
Go ahead and continue, Jillian. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, it was okay. I had finished my what I wanted to say about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Next up, we've got Sabrina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hello, my name is Sabrina. I'm going to talk about alley design. So the concept is designing alleys into public spaces that feature amenities for dining, shopping, and resting areas. And in order to accommodate that, we want the buildings along the alleyway should have design elements from the historic section of Main Street into the new development of buildings, along with implementing Warner throughout north and south of the alleyways, along with lighting and trees along the path in order to provide safe pedestrian access to Main Street and to create visual connectivity along east and west through the site, along with the proposed park near Rupert Alley as a concept to increase the amount of public space, and along with other additional opportunities to create more spaces for people to use for the public. Other than that, that is it.
So thank you, Sabrina. Obviously, the alleys are going to be a challenge, but there's tons of opportunities there. Right now, Rhubarb Alley and then the alleys to the south of the buildings off of Main Street, as you move east from Heritage Park towards Ryan Avenue, a lot of those alleys are used for deliveries and service entrances for the main buildings. So there's a lot of work to do to figure out how to activate those spaces, make it part of the public realm, and not interfere too much with the business side of deliveries and utilities and stuff like that. So that is our brief presentation tonight. As I mentioned, there's a lot of work that has been done. We got a lot of work to do still. We will be focusing on those three main concepts that we touched on here. Our final deliverable it will include all of these great design concepts. It'll focus on these three main, but we're going to include everything that the students have come up with. This is a great opportunity, but we also realize that this is something that the city of Sumner is going to take and utilize and actually implement. So we're excited for that. We've left a couple minutes here for comments and questions. So we're all here ready to answer.
Thanks, Gareth, Barry, and Bara. And we didn't hear from Ali, but but there he is.
Sure. Hello, Mayor Pugh. I'll be silent tonight. It's okay.
Wow, wait a minute. Great number of students and speakers and ideas, and the only one that got me was your something about the buses and buses not working, and I've always looked at need for some kind of bus trolley something connection through on Main Street through our historic downtown to the east side. So was it just because of the cost and the fact that we're not in Pierce Transit District and a bunch of things like that, or were there some other barriers towards doing it?
I'm not sure who's best to answer that.
I can answer that.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah. We just knew that there were talks about potentially bringing back the bus system or a bus route along Main Street, and we didn't know where that was going to go. So we didn't want to make any strict suggestions about a specific bus route. We did want to consider that bus routes and being able to improve access from areas that are farther away from Main Street was something that we considered a priority, or something that could be considered a priority further in development, but we don't want to prescribe anything too specific about bus routes at this point.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. Okay, council members, I'm going to try to maximize the screen here so I can see questions, comments from any of the presenters. Go ahead, Barb.
I mean, I think they're exciting, the ideas, and I like the presentations by each of you. Are we only talking from Traffic Avenue to Wood? You know, is that the only area that you're talking about?
I can respond to that, Councilmember Botetto. The scope of the project includes Main Street plus more or less a block north and south. So it takes in the alleys that run parallel to Main Street as well. And then as they talked about Heritage Park, kind of how can that be activated and be filling multiple needs.
All right, good.
But I think the question is, it just went down to Wood and sort of didn't go any further, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, thoughts, ideas? Go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you. The device that I'm watching on tonight made the pictures just about 2 by 2. So is there a way that we'll be able to see the pictures more easily? Because to me, that's how I grasp the understanding of what they're envisioning. So will those pictures in the presentations be available to us somehow?
Sure. I can forward on a PDF of this presentation to Ryan, and Ryan, if you could distribute it to everybody else, that would be great. And then that way you can blow them up whatever size you need.
Yep, absolutely.
I'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're not the only one, Cindy. These poor eyes had to go to the large screen, and even then it was tough. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say I really appreciate all of the work that the students have put into this. And I hope, like, first of all, I don't even know if you guys have been to Sumner, but I hope it's been enjoyable for you. I appreciate the work. And one thing that I have to say is I think that Sumner is at an interesting, I don't want to say crossroads, but maybe like intersecting point of the generations and the community. We very much have an older demographic that has put so much into this community for, decades and decades, half a century at least. And then we also have these younger families coming in, and like people in their 30s and 40s who are either first or second time home buyers, have kids, but still actually want to like socialize after hours. And so, and like the small town feel of Sumner, but sometimes miss an urban feeling, like they don't want to entirely give up the urban feeling. And I really think that some of the designs and everything kind of like touched on that. And in fact, I can tell you there's a business that is doing, even during COVID, is doing hugely well because they found a way to kind of combine the different groups of people who go out, but also want to bring families around and stuff. Anyways, I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate the thought that you've put into how to not ignore the makeup of a small town, but enhance it. So thank you.
Good comments, Charlotte. We are certainly becoming more multi-generational than we have in the past. Thing I enjoyed most about your question is that it was called Stump the Council Member. In this case, it was, what is a WUNIF? And that was worth the price of admission right there. So thank you very much for that entertainment. I enjoyed it.
I'll admit what I don't know.
Anyway, other council members, questions or comments? Wow. Okay, yeah, like the other council members, appreciate some larger versions of these things so we can see them and be able to get into them more than we did tonight. And I'll echo the other council member comments. thank all of you, for a lot of hard work and coming up with ideas and stuff that are uncomfortable. Okay, because they're uncomfortable because you're coming at them from a certain perspective, and other people haven't thought about those things, and it's good, it's creative, and I like the fact that you're going to put them all out there, and we'll see what works, and that's what it's about. Go ahead, Allie.
Well, I just wanted to also take the time to thank you and thank the city council members for the opportunity. We refer to this as a co-learning process. So this is a way for us to kind of learn from each other, and our students have been really engaged in that. So thank you for your input and supporting that. And as you can see, they do such wonderful jobs. The last thing you need is the dean to talk. So they are doing fine on their own. I'm hoping that the final product, when they present you with multiple options, some of those will be future exercises, but it will be in the document. They have done great work, great thinking. And to your point, council member, many of these are also around the issues of how to bring some level of urban activities into Sumner. Sumner is great. It's just adding a little bit more flavor in some other spaces, especially around public space. So thanks again for the opportunity, and happy to always be working with you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Allie, and thanks to all the students. And our future is in good hands, and that gives me great comfort. So anyway, thank you.
Absolutely, and I want to also make sure we all understand the amount of work that Dr. Safarova put into this, and now Garrett is putting into this. So they are actually great mentors and co-learners as well.
Yeah, thank all of you. Thank you. Okay, we'll let you go.
I have a
go ahead, Barb.
question. Yeah, who's on the Main Street Advisory Group? Is that the Main Street Association, or who's?
Ryan, you can answer that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. We have, I won't be able to rattle off the complete list, but yes, Sumner Main Street Association is represented on the advisory group, as well as a number of downtown business owners, some with expertise in planning like JMJ Consulting, Brian Francini, number of folks, and then quite a bit of advisory from our staff as well, engineers, planners, landscape architects. So we're trying to allow the students to come up with these fantastic ideas, but as Gareth was pointing out, also get to a implementation that's realistic and constructible. So we're trying to provide the input in order to guide those ideas. So it's been a really great process.
That's good to know that it's practical as well as, what if we did this? So yeah, I really enjoyed the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. And just note, thank you, Bara, for putting that link into the chat, so we can get that to all the council members. Thank you very much. Okay, anything else? Any last minute comments, questions? See none. Hey, thank all of you again. Have a good rest of the evening and the rest of the week. It's going to get into, believe it or not, close to like 80 degrees coming up here. It's like, when is the last time have we seen like 80 degrees around here? That's a blessing right there. So enjoy. Okay, take care.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, now we will go on to, boy, all of a sudden need some lighting assist on this one. East Sumner Neighborhood Rezoning. Who do I call on here?
Ryan's been doing such a great job. He'll introduce it and then turn it over to Ann.
Okay, Ryan.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Tonight, we are going to be focusing on the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan aspect of our 2020 comp plan update that Associate Planner Ann Siegenthaler has been working on so diligently and so hard for the last several months. And I was out of town for a few weeks and know that some conversations had been had about council over the Sumner neighborhood plan zoning. So Anne is going to be presenting some alternatives that are a result of that discussion, and looking forward to some further discussion and some direction, if this is the direction we need to go, primarily because obviously Anne she'll have additional work to do updating and our consultants will have work to do, update the plan itself, and also updating our EIS and potentially doing some additional noticing. So with that, probably overly lengthy introduction, I'll turn it over to Anne. She has a presentation for us.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Pugh and council members. You know, I just listened to 3 really, really interesting presentations and topics. So thanks very much for making me go last. Those are hard acts to follow. But I will keep it short because I know you've had a long evening tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. I just have a brief PowerPoint to share with you. And so as Ryan mentioned, we had some earlier discussions about the East Sumner neighborhood and really how to respond to some of the concerns that we've been hearing. And I will cut to the chase and tell you that tonight staff is going to be recommending that we remove the resource protection zone entirely. Based on what we've heard, we think that that's probably the best direction to go at this point. It will best respond to property owner concerns, and I think it will still preserve the basic policy direction that we've been working on. But first, I want to just do a brief recap of how we got here. So we did the resource protection zone concept, as you might recall, started back in June of 2019. We had a public open house, and we had the dots you see on this image reflect various people in the community indicating their preference and interest in this idea of a central wetlands preserve. So there was support for that. And then in July of 2019, staff took this concept of a resource protection zone to the city council in the planning commission. And again, we heard support for that and got direction to pursue that concept. And of course, at this time, it's just a concept. And then throughout 2020, 2021, we had a number of study sessions and public hearings with the city council and the planning commission. And we started hearing a lot more from property owners about their concerns. And we had a middle ground, as you'll recall, that was presented when we began to hear from property owners that the resource protection zone would be too restrictive. We looked at a middle ground where property owners could have the option of getting their own wetland study and adjusting the resource protection line based on their own study. And that was a viable option, but it still was not as flexible for owners, and we still heard concern from property owners. So based on that, staff believes now really the best option, that I will just say it's really the cleanest option, is to remove the resource protection zone entirely. And this is staff's current recommendation, and I believe it gives property owners the most flexibility. The wetlands regulations that we have in place should be adequate to protect the wetlands there. Those regulations aren't going away. And so under this proposal, all the resource protection zoning would be eliminated in that central wetlands area, and the current zoning would remain. So most of that's general commercial. I'll show you a map here in just a moment. So the central wetlands area primarily would go back to its existing zoning and not change. And only the city parcels, which are primarily wetlands, would be rezoned to resource protection zone. So this is what we looked at previously, where we had the resource protection zone in the central wetlands, high density residential, medium density residential. These are the city parcels here to the far east. And all of that central area would change. And this is what it would look like. So it's currently zoned general commercial throughout this entire area. It just so happens we have one parcel, this large, under one ownership. This large parcel is low density residential, almost entirely wetlands. That would remain as low density residential. City parcels would be rezoned resource protection here and also up north along Salmon Creek. This area where we propose to have 2 parcels rezoned to medium density residential to provide a buffer between high density and low density, that proposal, we recommend moving forward with that. And then the other recommendations are pretty much the same. As you have heard, we maintain our general commercial zoning south of 64th, but we protect that area for commercial uses by prohibiting multifamily residential down in this area. All the other zones pretty much remain the same. So that's the proposal. And one image that I would like to leave you with is this image of this blue overlay here. This represents the wetland study that the city conducted in 2020. And I wanted to put this slide up here just to remind everyone that regardless of the zoning, if we remove the resource protection zone, which I think is the best direction to go, the wetlands are still going to be there. And this is approximately where they are. Our 2020 study that the city conducted is a pretty reliable study, as in our belief. And we don't think there will be a lot of new information that comes out that challenges the accuracy of that. But the property owners questioned that. That's one of their greatest concerns in this entire East Sumner neighborhood plan update. So we'd like to respond to that and give them the opportunity to conduct their own wetland studies and determine where they think the different zoning might be in the future. And that can all still happen in the future, but it won't happen with this East Sumner plan update. So with that, next steps, we're asking for direction from the council tonight so that we can move forward on the East Sumner neighborhood plan update. We have the final environmental impact statement that we'll be bringing to you for adoption as well. So we have a number of pieces that all have to fall into place to bring back to you. And we're hoping that we can come back to the council and get your decision on May 17th. So that's why we'd like to get some direction from you tonight on this new rezoning proposal. That's all I have, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. I got a couple of council members before I call on Councilmember Reed and Deputy Mayor. Just make a comment is that I encouraged staff to sort of go in this direction. I think what will happen eventually is you're going to end up in the same place that was proposed by staff originally, with an area, as Ann points out, that is wetlands that could be resource conservation area, et cetera. But what we were hearing from property owners was, wait a minute, the city had made this determination, and we feel that we should be able to make our own determination by hiring a wetlands expert, and it may not agree with what the city had done with its wetlands expert, and or mitigate it. Although I would question whether that's cost effective, but you know, that becomes a financial decision the property owner then undertakes. The other part was the tax break that people would have for property that isn't, can't be used for as commercial property. You can still go to the assessor's office with the wetlands report and, get some tax relief, for those property owners that may wish to do so. So, and then third, I was tired of, and I don't know how to characterize this, but staff was continually under assault on this one, and about taking away people's ability to do what they can on their own property, and I said, okay, let them have that ability, and so anyway, just throwing that out there. They were nudged in that direction by me. So go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Ann, and everybody else that worked on this for making those adjustments. I'm in support of eliminating the resource protection areas. It's not that we're abandoning resource protections. I totally understand that it was intended as a potential benefit to delineate the areas and put them on record. But in this case, by eliminating that, it gives the property owners the ability to drive it themselves with their own studies. Should they choose to sell or do something different with the property, then it'll be upon them, which it would have been anyway, to come up with their own studies to work on things. So instead of it being designated for them, they'll still have the ability to do it themselves, although from my understanding from the studies, it's not necessarily going to be a different result in the end. It's just a different way to get there. But thank you, everyone, for all the work on this. And thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Patrick. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with this. I'm not going to repeat everything everybody said because it's all the same, but good job. I'm on board.
Okay, other council members, questions, comments? Okay, unless I hear a major objection coming out from majority of you, we will proceed with under the assumption that you got a thumbs up for this latest change in direction and approach. So that's what I'm seeing around the screen. So Ann, continue forth and thank you very much. You put one heck of a lot into this. I firmly believe it will end up exactly as what you had presented to the council. It will just get there a different way, and really appreciate everything that you have done, not only on this part of the comprehensive plan, but on all the rest of the comprehensive plan elements that you shepherded through the process. Outstanding job.
Thank you, Mayor Pugh, and thank you, council members, for all your efforts and giving us feedback on this so we could get to this point. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Newman.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to thank staff for sincerely and genuinely listening to public comment and taking into consideration. I know sometimes like public comment can be based on like, it may not entail like the full perspective or may go against something else that we are trying to achieve. But in cases like these, I appreciate you taking the comments seriously and adapting as you go through the process. I just wanted to say thank you for that rather than being overly dismissive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Any other council comments? Go ahead, Cindy.
Well, Anne didn't think her presentation was going to be exciting, but I found that very exciting because it was such a surprise to me. I thought we were going to be working out another type of compromise somehow, because I had been reading some of the property owners' comments, but the staff seems to have come up with the help of the mayor, what they think is the right direction to make sure that the property owners feel like their rights are being not violated. So thank you for your efforts.
Okay. Any other council comments? Okay. Hey, again, thank you very much, Ann. And you guys will see this whenever you said it was coming before them. Sorry, lost the dates. Okay, let's move on to City Administrator Report. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll make this brief tonight. I think everybody saw today that the governor rolled Pierce County back to phase 2. Just want to let you know that I've already had a meeting with Ryan and Lana and Carmen to make sure that we re-message to our businesses, particularly our restaurants, that they do have the option for temporary use of or creating temporary use areas either in their parking lot or in additional parking spots. Anything we can do to help our businesses go through this. And you also see additional vaccine clinics that are be popping up in Sumner here in the next few weeks. Just watch the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department's website for those dates and how to register for those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay. Agenda setting, any calendar issues either with our council meetings and or committee meetings? Hooray, hooray. There is no executive session. And seeing that there is no any other business before the city council, this meeting is adjourned at 8:06. Have a nice evening, everyone. Enjoy the weather this week.
Good night, everyone.